The Gormenghast Trilogy by Mervyn Peake. Book 1, Titus Groan. A Change of Colour. The morning light is strengthening, and the hour of the great breakfast approaches. Flay, utterly distraught, is wandering up and down the candle-lit stone lanes where he knows he will be alone. He had gathered the twigs and he had flung them away in disgust, only to regather them, for the very thought of disobeying his master is almost as dreadful to him as the memory of the creature he had seen on the mantelpiece. Finally, and in despair, he has crunched the twigs between his own stick-like fingers, the simultaneous crackling of the twigs and of his knuckles, creating for a moment a miniature storm of brittle thunder in the shadow of the trees. Then, striding back to the castle, he has descended uneasily to the stone lanes. It is very cold, yet there are great pearls upon his forehead, and in each pearl is the reflection of a candle flame. Mrs. Slag is in the bedroom of the Countess, who is piling her rust-coloured hair above her head as though she were building a castle. Every now and again, Mrs. Slag peers furtively at the bulk before the mirror, but her attention is chiefly centred upon an object on the bed. It is wrapped in a length of lavender-coloured velvet, and little porcelain bells are pinned here and there all over it. One end of a golden chain is attached to the velvet near the centre of what has become, through process of winding, a small velvet cylinder, or mummy, measuring some 3.5 feet in length and with a diameter of about 18 inches. At the other end of the chain, and lying on the bed beside the lavender roll, is a sword with a heavy blade of blue-black steel and a hilt embossed with the letter G. This sword is attached to the gold chain with a piece of string. Mrs. Slag dabs a little powder upon something that moves in the shadows at one end of the roll, and then peers about her, for it is hard for her to see what she is doing. The shadows in the bedroom of the Countess are of so dark a breed. Between their red rims her eyes wander here and there before she bends over Titus and plucks at her underlip. Again her eyes peer up at the Countess, who seems to have grown tired of her hair, the edifice being left unfinished, as though some fitful architect had died before the completion of a bizarre edifice which no one else knew how to complete. Mrs. Slag moves from the bedside in little half-running, half-walking steps, and from the table beneath the candelabra plucks a candle that is waxed to the wood among the birdseed, and, lighting it from a guttering torso of tallow that stands by, she returns to the lavender cylinder which has begun to twist and turn. Her hand is unsteady as she lifts the wax above the head of Titus, and the wavering flame makes it leap. His eyes are very wide open. As he sees the light, his mouth puckers and works, and the heart of the earth contracts with love as he totters at the wellhead of tears. His little body writhes in its dreadful bolster, and one of the porcelain bells chimes sweetly. "Slag," said the Countess in a voice of husk. Nanny, who is as light as a feather, starts into the air an inch or two at the sudden sound, and comes to earth again with a painful jarring of her little arid ankles. But she does not cry out, for she is biting her lower lip while her eyes cloud over. She does not know what she has done wrong, and she has done nothing wrong, but there is always a feeling of guilt about her when she shares a room with the Countess. This is partly due to the fact that she irritates the Countess, and the nurse can sense this all the while. So it is in a thin and tremulous voice that she stammers, "Yes, yes, your ladyship. Yes, yes, your ladyship." The Countess does not turn her head to speak, but stares past herself in the cracked mirror, her elbows resting on the table, her head supported in the cups of her hands. "Is the child ready?" Yes, just ready. Ready now, your ladyship. Bless his little smallness. Yes. Is the sword fixed? Yes, the sword, She is about to say the horrid black sword, but she checks herself nervously, for who is she to express her feelings when ritual is involved? But it's so hot for him, she continues hurriedly. So hot for his little body in all this velvet. Though, of course, she adds, a stupid little smile working in and out of the wrinkles of her lips. It's very pretty. The Countess turns slowly in her chair. Slag, she says. Come over here, Slag. The old woman, her heart beating wildly, patters her way around the bed and stands by the dressing table. She clasps her hands together on her flat chest and her eyes are wide open. Have you still no idea of how to answer even simple questions? Asks the Countess very slowly. Nanny shakes her head, but suddenly a red spot appears in either cheek. I can answer questions, I can, she cries, startling herself with her own ineffectual vehemence. The Countess does not seem to have heard her. Try and answer this one, she murmurs. Mrs. Slag cocks her head on one side and listens like a grey bird. Are you attending, Slag? Nanny nods her head as though suffering from palsy. Where did you meet that youth? There is a moment's silence. That Steerpike, the Countess adds. Long ago, said Nanny, and closes her eyes as she waits for the next question. She feels pleased with herself. Where is what I said? Where, not when? Booms the voice. Mrs. Slag tries to gather her thoughts together. Where? Oh, where was it? She wondered. It was long ago. And then she recalled how he had appeared with Fuchsia suddenly at the door of her room. With Fuchsia? Oh, yes. It was with my Fuchsia, your ladyship. Where does he come from? Answer me, Slag, and then finish my hair. I never do know. No, not ever. I have never been told. Oh, my poor heart, no. Where could the boy come from? She peers at the dark bulk above her. Lady Gertrude wipes the palm of her hand slowly across her brow. You are the same Slag, she says. The same brilliant Slag. Nanny begins to cry, wishing desperately that she were clever. No use crying, said the Countess. No use. My birds don't cry, not very often. Were you at the fire? The word fire is terrible to Mrs. Slag. She clutches her hands together. Her bleary eyes grow wild, her lips tremble, for in her imagination she can see the great flames rising about her. Finish my hair, Nanny Slag. Stand on a chair and do it. Nanny turns to find a chair. The room is like a shipwreck. The red walls glower in the candlelight. The old woman patters her way between stalactites of tallow, boxes and old sofas. The Countess whistles. And a moment later the room is alive with wings. By the time Mrs. Slag has dragged a chair to the dressing table and climbed upon it, the Countess is deep in conversation with the magpie. Nanny disapproves of birds altogether and cannot reconcile the habits of the Countess with the House of Groan, but she is used to such things, not being over 70 years old for nothing. Bending a little over her ladyship's locks, she works with difficulty to complete the hirsute cornice, for the light is bad. Now then, darling, now then, says the heavy voice below her, and her old body thrills, for she has never known the Countess speak to her in such a way before. But glancing over the mountainous shoulder, she sees that the Countess is talking to a bedraggled finch, and Nanny Slag is desolate. So, Fuchsia was the first to find him, was she? Says the Countess, rubbing her finger along the finch's throat. Mrs. Slag, startled, as she always is when someone speaks, fumbles with the red hank in her hand.
Who? Oh, who do you mean? Your ladyship. Oh, she's always a good girl, Fuchsia is. Yes, always.
The Countess gets to her feet in a monumental way, rushing several objects from the dressing table to the floor with her elbow. As she rises, she hears the sound of sobbing and turns her head to the lavender roll.
Go away, slag, go away, and take him with you. Is Fuchsia dressed? Yes. Oh, my poor heart, yes. Fuchsia is all ready, yes, quite ready, and waiting in her room. Oh, yes, she is.
His breakfast will soon be beginning,
says the Countess, turning her eyes from a brass clock to her infant son.
Very soon.
Nanny, who has recovered Titus from the fastness of the bed, stops at the door before pattering out into the dawn-lit corridor. Her eyes stare back almost triumphantly, and a little pathetic smile works at the crinkled corners of her mouth.
His breakfast, she whispers. Oh, my weak heart. His first breakfast.
Steerpike has been found at last, Fuchsia colliding with him as he rounds a corner of the staircase on his way down from the aunt's. He is very sprucely dressed, his high shoulders without a speck of dust upon them, his fingernails pared, his hair smoothed down over his pasty-coloured forehead. He is surprised to see Fuchsia, but he does not show it, merely raising his eyebrows in an expression both inquiring and deferential at the same time. You are up very early, Lady Fuchsia. Fuchsia, her breast heaving from her long run up the stairs, cannot speak for a moment or two. Then she says,
Dr. Prune wants you.
Why me? Says the youth to himself, but aloud he says, Where is he?
In my father's room.
Steerpike licks his lips slowly. Is your father ill?
Yes, oh yes, very ill.
Steerpike turns his head away from Fuchsia, for the muscles of his face cry out to relax. He gives them a free rein, and then, straightening his face and turning to Fuchsia, he says, Everything I can do, I will do. Suddenly, with the utmost nimbleness, he skips past her, jumping the first 4 steps together, and races down the stone flight on his way to the Earl's bedroom. He has not seen the doctor for some time. Having left his service, their relationship is a little strained. But this morning, as he enters at the Earl's door, he can see there will be neither space nor time for reminiscences in his own or the doctor's brain. Prunsquallor, in his lime-green dressing-gown, is pacing to and fro before the mantelpiece with the stealth of some kind of vertical cat. Not for a moment does he take his eyes off the Earl, who, still upon the mantelpiece, watches the physician with great eyes. At the sound of Steerpike at the door, the round eyes move for a moment and stare over the doctor's shoulder. But Prunsquallor has not shifted his steady, magnified gaze. The roguish look is quite absent from his long, bizarre face. The doctor has been waiting for this moment. Prancing forward, he reaches up with his white hands and pins the Earl's arms to his sides, dragging him from his perch. Steerpike is at the doctor's side in a moment, and together they carry the sacrosanct body to the bed and turn it over upon its face. Sepulchrave has not struggled, only emitting a short, stifled cry. Steerpike holds the dark figure down with one hand, for there is no attempt to escape, and the doctor flicks a slim needle into his lordship's wrist and injects a drug of such weird potency that when they turn the patient over, Steerpike is startled to see that the face has changed to a kind of chalky green. But the eyes have altered also, and are once more the sober, thoughtful human eyes which the castle knew so well. His fingers have uncurled, the claws are gone.
Be so good as to draw the blind,
says the doctor, raising himself to his full height beside the bed, and returning his needle to its little silver case. This done, He taps the points of his long, white fingers together thoughtfully. With the blinds drawn across the sunrise, the colour of his lordship's face is mercifully modified. That was quick work, Doctor. Steerpike is balancing upon his heels. What happens next? He clicks his tongue ruminatively as he waits for Prunsquallor's answer. What was the drug you used, Doctor?
I am not in the mood to answer questions, dear boy,
replies Prunsquallor, showing Steerpike the whole range of his teeth, but in a mirthless way.
Not at all in the mood.
What about the breakfast? Says Steerpike, unabashed.
His lordship will be at the breakfast.
Will he, though? Says the youth, peering at the face. What about his colour?
In half an hour his skin will have returned to normal. He will be there. Now, fetch me flay and some boiling water, a towel. He must be washed and dressed. Quickly now!
Before Steerpike leaves the room, he bends over Lord Sepulchrave, whistling tunelessly between his teeth. The Earl's eyes are closed, and there is a tranquillity about his face which has been absent for many years.